You know, before I lived in Dominican Republic, I thought I had understood how life worked. If you needed money, you got a job. If you needed more money, you got a better job. If you were struggling, you just work more hours. And that was the logic that I had carried for a long time. And honestly, I never really questioned that. It was normal. It was what I saw growing up. It was what everybody around me seemed to believe. So when I started thinking about living overseas, I didn't realize that I was bringing the same type of mentality with me. I thought changing countries would automatically change everything. I thought that a new place would give me like a new life. But when I first got to DR, I was still the same person mentally, right? I still measured my financial security the same way. I still looked at money the same way. I still thought the answer to pressure was finding another job. I remember being on my phone one day, scrolling job listings. The same habit, same mindset, same search. And I had this moment where I looked around and basically it kind of just hit me. Like, I'm in a completely different country, right? But mentally, I was still standing in the same room that I had came from, if that makes sense. Because it just stuck with me. I don't know. When I noticed it, I started noticing other things too. I started paying attention to how people around me actually moved. And not in some like glamorous way, not in like a social media fantasy type of way, just real life. People selling food, people doing transportation, people helping out tourists, people running small shops and stores, colmados, people making money online, people combining different things together just to make it work. None of it had looked perfect. A lot of it looked messy, but it also had looked alive to me, if that makes sense. It looked flexible. It looked like people were responding to life instead of waiting on life. And I realized that I had spent so much time only respecting one kind of income, the kind that came with a schedule, the kind that had came from being hired, the kind that had came with somebody else approving you first. Now, I'm not saying that all jobs are bad. I'm not saying everybody should just quit and chase some random ideas. That's definitely not what I'm saying. That's not what changed for me. What changed for me was something else, something deeper than that. I had stopped seeing employment as the only serious option. That's the huge difference. Because when you only believe in one path, right, you stop noticing all the other paths and all the other opportunities. And once that happened, that's when my mind started going in different ways. So I started asking myself different questions. What skills can I learn that travel with me? What can I do from a laptop? What industries are real, but they're ignored? What can I study for once and use it long term? What kind of income doesn't disappear just because I had changed locations? Those questions had led me into places that I never had thought much about before. I'm talking about like, remote sales or client-based work, things connected to real needs, things people actually use, things that exist whether the economy feels good or bad. That was something different for me, because back then I used to only think in terms of how many applications I can put in. But later on, I started thinking in terms of access, right? Access to like an industry, or access to a skill, access to a license, access to a market. And that shift, like, it might sound like it's not a lot, but it was big for me, because I had noticed that a lot of my stress in the past came from feeling like opportunity was outside of me, like it was hidden in a building somewhere, or hiding behind a hiring manager, or hidden in somebody else's decision. But living overseas made me feel that less. And it's not because everything had became easy for me, because it definitely didn't. There were still, things I was uncertain about. I still felt pressure to do something, right? I still had moments of not knowing what comes next. But I started, how do I explain it? I started to feel less dependent on one answer. That gave me like the kind of mental freedom that I didn't expect. And I started to notice how expensive old thinking can actually be. Sometimes people say they want to move overseas because rent's cheaper, food's cheaper, life is cheaper, and that can be true. And if your mindset stays expensive, you can carry the heaviest cost with you. If you believe there's only one way to survive, you can move anywhere in the world if you think like that, and you'll still feel trapped. And that was one of the biggest lessons for me. The location helps, but the mindset is what matters more. Dominican Republic didn't hand me success. It didn't magically solve all my problems. But what it did was create distance. Distance from my old routines, from what my assumptions were, distance from the idea that life only works one way and it has to be that way. And honestly, distance is really powerful. Sometimes you need to step far away enough from your old life to finally see it clearly. And that's what had happened to me. I started seeing like some of the habits or beliefs that I had, or things that I thought were actually facts, were really just habits of mine. And habits, they're repeated so many times that they just feel permanent. Let me cross this street real quick before I get ran over. This is what it looks like out here. It's still chilly, it's crazy. But what the heck was I saying? Something about habits. Anyways, now when I think about work, I think differently about it. I still respect jobs. I still respect stable income. I mean, those things are tools, right? You use it as a way to get to where you're trying to go. It's not something that you want to be stuck at for 20, 30 years. That doesn't make any sense. But I just understand that, using that as one chapter to build on to your next chapter. So I don't see it like a whole map anymore. Finding a good job and that's going to take you to your future. I see licenses, I see skills, I see business opportunities, I see service, I see income that's portable, I see opportunities that I would have ignored before. And honestly, that might be the biggest thing living overseas changed for me. Not my location, not my passport, not my finances, but my imagination. Because once your imagination expands, right, life starts looking different to you. You notice doors that weren't always there. You notice paths, and opportunities that you used to walk past. You notice that sometimes the biggest move you can actually make isn't across a country. It's the way that you used to think. And that's what Dominican Republic had changed for me.